Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Mind Shifters Radio with your co-host, the Forgiveness Doctor, Dr. Michael Rice, and his wife Jeanie. Michael and Jeanie share with you the wisdom of the ancient Aramaic internal process of forgiveness. They offer tools and support 5 days a week from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. They will support you in building a solid foundation within yourself to live in pure love. In Aramaic, Rakhma. Michael is the author of Why Is This Happening to Me Again? For more information on Michael and Jeanie, please visit www.whyagain.com. And now your co-host, the Forgiveness Doctor, Dr. Michael and Jeanie Rice.
And the truth that is rooted within me.
Hi, and welcome to Mind Shifters Radio with the Forgiveness Doctor, Dr. Michael Rice. And I didn't have it pulled up yet, so I'm not positive which day it is on the Memorial Day. I think it's 68. And welcome, Michael.
Hey, delighted. Hope everybody's day is blessed. We're just so honored to be with you and to have this opportunity to share the tools we teach. When Jeanie talked about Memorial Day, we have an invitation to everybody who plays on the show to be willing to help us put an end to war on planet Earth. And many people say, well, that's a pretty, ambitious project. How are you going to do that, Michael Rice? Well, I'm not going to do it personally, but you are. How are you going to do it? Well, our invitation to you is that each day, in order to honor those who have been the subject to the insanities of war, we invite you to pick one issue, just one small issue in your life where you're willing to remove the hostility and fear in your mind around that issue. And as you do, what happens is change the world. You remove the energy of the insanity of war when you remove a little piece of hostility or fear from planet Earth. And we hit critical mass. We'll have done the job of honoring those who've gone before us and had to play that insane game out by putting an end to it. And that's what we're here to do. That's one of our jobs. One of our purposes in doing this show. So welcome, Jeanie. Do we have anybody in the chat room? I know I talked with Dr. Tim today, and he had a thought or two to share. And
Tim is in, and he is also on the line, and so is David. We don't have any questions yet. We did have an email come through earlier, though, asking you to address the 2 minds, and I think in their discussion we decided there were actually 4 minds. So maybe after you talk to Tim, then you'll address that for this gentleman.
Cool. Dr. Tim, how are you this morning, sir? Or this afternoon, pardon me?
Doing quite well, thank you.
Awesome.
You were asking earlier about a topic for today's show, and the topic yesterday seemed to be filters. And I guess the best way to talk about this is an example. There was a person that came to see me. Actually, there were 3 yesterday. 2 good examples stand out. One was a woman who was told something by a gentleman she had just begun dating, and she felt like it was a slam or an insult to her, and everyone she repeated it to thought the gentleman had been honoring her and praising her. And she was completely unable to see that his words were positive. And it took us probably 20 minutes of talking back and forth and having her breathe and step back from it before I repeated exactly the same words she had told me, and she was finally able to see it as a positive comment from this gentleman.
Differently, right?
And then another person who's been doing quite a bit of work, doing some worksheets, journaling, and tapping, and she had an encounter with someone that she used to date, and that's a loose term here because it was just letting him take advantage of her kind of thing in a relationship. And she had another interaction with him, and she walked away from it just shaking her head, wondering, what did I ever see in this guy? So after just 3 or 4 months of doing worksheets and journaling and doing breath work, when she reconnected with this person, she had no attraction to him whatsoever. He hadn't changed at all. He was still exactly the same person. But something had changed in the way she looked out through her eyes, and she had a different filter set, and there was just no connection. There was no attraction. There was no reason to attack him or accuse him of anything, and there wasn't any reason to continue the relationship.
Right.
So maybe you could help us explore a little bit about how that works from the ancient Aramaic perspective.
Sure. It also ties in that one of the thoughts as you were speaking, Tim, and for those who don't know Dr. Tim is the author of a blog on his support group and the work he's doing with the forgiveness work, and his website is www.cs4ch.com. Is that correct?
Yes.
So you can tap into to Dr. Tim's work with this work. He's got a couple of audios on his website for things that he's done on the work, and awesome. But one of the thoughts that came as you were speaking was there's a really cool line in the Course in Miracles, and of course the forgiveness process is about goals, canceling goals. And one of the things the Course says is you must realize the distorting power of the way you want it to be. And that ties right in with which filter is active, because if you have a goal based in hostility or fear, what will happen is you'll lose a condition of love in your mind. It will activate one of the other filters, hostility or fear. They're basically 3 filters in 2 different parts of the brain. One is in the frontal lobes and one is in the back of the brain. The frontal lobes are where intentions are stored. The back of the brain is where perception is stored. And so if you go back to the Aramaic, and we talked about this the other day, the first law, not the rule of a superior, but rather understanding how the eternal forces work in the human mind. The first law for human beings was to maintain a condition that was called Rakhma. And Rakhma is a filter in the frontal lobes of the brain that allows the mind to only use intentions that are keyed to love in forming goals. So if Rakhma is active, that's the active filter. The goals, the intentions will be loving, the goals will be loving. The goal is the driver that causes the mind to select what data it's going to use. And there's a second filter that was on the perceptual part of the brain, in the back of the brain, and that was called Khooba in Aramaic. You'll recall that they said perfect love casts out fear. In Aramaic, those 2 filters active were called perfect love. Your mind cannot produce a fear-based reality and hostility-based reality if those 2 filters are set. However, if our goal keys into some form of hostility or fear, the other 2 filters are hostility and fear. If the fear filter, if the goal links to fear, and the fear filter is the one that's set in the frontal lobes of the brain, then what happens, and you can, if you want to get deeper into this stuff, folks, if you want to look at it and see a video on it, the video on our catalog entitled Getting the Stress You Need goes into this schematic. But in the frontal lobes of the brain, we have a filter called fear, and whenever fear is active, the only pool of intentions available for setting goals are negative. So negative intentions then resonate the fear filter in the back of the brain over perception, and the only quality of reality, the only quality of data that can be used to build the perceptual output of the mind is that which is keyed to that which threatens. So if you're feeling threatened, when they said to Yeshua, how do you tell where somebody's really at? He says you look at their fruit. So one of the fruits of the mind is what's the quality of your perception. If it's loving, Rakhma and Khooba are the active filters. If it's threatening, then you know that fear is the active filter. The third filter over the frontal lobes of the brain is hostility. And if that filter is the active filter, then the only quality of intentions available are destructive intentions. And when our intentions are destructive, the hostility filter is active over the back of the brain, over perception, and we now have the only quality of reality, the only pool of perception that becomes available at that point. Loving and threatening realities are cut off. What the person who has hostility set experiences in the way of a reality is that which is irritating. So, if we use an example, we've all heard about the little lady who was, 5'2", and her husband was 6'9" and beat her every day. And so this woman lives in constant terror. And in her terror, she only sees what's threatening about her husband. One day, maybe you were the person who went in and helped to rescue her from that abusive situation. You got her out of the house. She is terrorized. She knows she never wants to see this man again because he is so terrifying to her. Now, if she stays out of that relationship, notice 2 years later, she's back in another relationship where terror is the main focus of the relationship. But before she went off and, into another relationship, notice that it took about 2 weeks. You got her out of that threatening house. You got her into a safe place. And about 2 weeks later, what did she say to you? Oh, I've got to go back because I love him. Well, what just happened? 2 weeks ago, you were terrorized. Well, what occurred was the activity of the fear filter had decayed away in the mind, and up came the love filters. And now she doesn't see anything to do with the terror. She'll go back, and notice it won't take too many days before she remembers why she left. The terror is back in her face again. The fear filter is up again. But then, and this just demonstrates the third filter. So there are two of the filters, the love filter and the fear filter. But then, remember one day they said something in her mind snapped and she went after him, and you didn't want to be him, when she went after him, even though she was only 5'2". They say something in her mind snapped. Well, nothing snapped. What happened was that all of a sudden she flipped out of the fear filter. Remember, the fear filter shows only what's threatening about an object of attention. It goes into our own perceptual bank, finds things keyed to threat, and builds a reality, and projects it, and makes it all about them. But when she flipped out of fear into hostility, all of a sudden she could no longer see what's threatening. I don't care if he's 6'9" or not. She could no longer see what was threatening, and what she does is she takes him apart because now she's in her hostility filter, and the only thing she can see is what she is irritated about, and she's really agitated. And so there are the three filters: hostility, fear, and love. The end result in the perceptual mind, the fruit of the love filter, is loving perceptions. We saw an awesome experience 2 days ago. We did a worksheet with a young lady named Lynn who had some hostility about 3 different periods in her life, and in that worksheet went through those 3 filters, and you'll notice the place she ended up as she cleared out that part of her mind was she ended up in compassion and love rather than hostility and fear. She went from wanting to shoot somebody to holding a space and offering healing to that person. That's a pretty major shift. And all that shifted was filters. When she was able to forgive and remove the content that locked her into the fear filter and into the hostility filter, the mind shifts. And so that's an example. If you haven't listened to that show, If you go to the website, www.whyagain.com, on the right-hand side, you'll see a link that says Download Worksheets. If you tap into that link, you will see the 3 items. If you're not familiar with the forgiveness work we're doing, first item is the Chapter 24 from my book, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? Second item is the actual worksheet, 7-step reality management. Third one, Jeanie set it up so that the show from 2 days ago is the third link there. Listen to it. You'll see exactly what we're talking about with these filter shifts. And where you want to live is in Rakhma. You want to be in harmony with the first law, which has got nothing to do with some superior's going to sock it to you if you don't obey. It's totally and completely tied into how you maintain human life, how you maintain sanity in your life. So that's the direction we're heading with the forgiveness process and where we want to go. So, Tim, any thoughts on that? Further discussion?
Well, I just think that it's noteworthy to say that while the filter gets set, many of us have been living with a fear filter and a hostility filter set for so long that we've come to believe that's our natural state. And in the process of living and accumulating experiences and memories and beliefs about ourselves, then we create these other more specific filters, like the one the woman was demonstrating the other day. She clearly had a filter that said, no man could find me valuable or attractive. And so even when this man said to her something about she was a gift from God in his life, she couldn't hear that as a positive thing.
Right. And through the fear or hostility filter, it's going to be interpreted completely unlike what was meant.
And so that, this work becomes so much more important when you understand the habit of being, living from either the pattern of being set in the fear filter or the hostility filter, and all of the accumulated beliefs about self that get amassed over time. And they color our experience in ways we're not able to understand.
Yes. And we have a propensity to live in the patterned filter use of our generations. In other words, the filter we tend to view life from is usually genetic. And the reason for that is because we are energetic beings, as our parents were energetic beings, and we inherit from our generations all of the inclinations towards certain states of the mind, as well as, of course, certain states of body. And so the tendency is to be in those patterns, and when you start going in and removing the genetic goals that you have, that is, forgiving those goals, you start to create different perceptions. The functioning purpose of what's called the body's mind is to manage stress, to keep stress at acceptable levels. And the way that stress is created is by setting a goal, and once we set a goal, then the functioning purpose of the mind is to show us how to achieve that goal. Interesting thing is, however, is if we have some form of hostility or fear, if that's the active filter, our minds can't show us how to reduce our stress. We'll tend to be locked into that stress. And so it's when you get back into Rakhma, when you decide, there's something more to this first law than some, authority called God trying to force me into something. You see that it's just, this is only for your benefit. This is how you maintain a human life. And, of course, we have an easy definition for a human life. Hold a newborn child, you know exactly what a human life is. And so that's where we want to head, and that's where we're supporting each person in the chat room, on the show, and anybody who ever listens to this. That's where we want to support you going, and that is putting to work the tool of forgiveness. Congratulations, Lisa, on that work with your boys. That's pretty awesome. In the chat room, I'm looking in the chat room, and I see that Lisa, who's a young lady who spent a year here at Heartland. If you remember, several weeks ago, she was in a courtroom with her former, who was trying to take away her children, and in front of the judge in the court was able to read the commitment from the Healing Through Relationships workshop to the former, who's been, no, I guess you could say less than loving. And so, nice work. And she was just sharing in the chat room, for those who might be listening and can't see it, that she just spent some time with her boys and took some worksheets in and did them with them. So she had taught them to her children a couple of years ago, and is reintroducing after an extended separation. So we're glad to see you back in there and connected, Lisa, and we hold the space that all that work that you've done just produces the result of healing in all corners of that situation. So, Tim, any other thoughts in that direction?
Well, the primary thing is what you just, to echo what you just said, which is to actually do the worksheets, and the power of having Lynn call up on Tuesday and have the willingness to actually face whatever came up and be honest with you about it, and the demonstration of the shift, not just of her filters, but of her experience of the memory that was 20-plus years old. I would offer that the tendency in our minds is to say, well, but that was her, or she's a special case, or that's only because Michael was working with her. And I would offer that that's just the ego talking, that anybody who picks up a worksheet with willingness has the capacity to do exactly what Lynn did.
Absolutely. No specials, just we humans, and an ancient tool that goes back 2,000 years on how to change the content and the reflections from the body's mind, how to shift that, how to make it different. David, do you have any thoughts in that direction?
Well, this is the time to get David in so he can talk about the building the brain cells game and getting somebody to help you validate your commitment daily.
Cool. Are you with us, David?
I am, Michael. Let's see. How's the connection?
Good. You sound loud and clear.
Okay, good. Hi, Tim. How are you doing?
Quite well, David. How about yourself?
Good. Long time no talk with. It'd be great to have you at the intensive and hang out here. It goes right in alignment with what you're talking about and having support. If there's any way that you can make it, we're going to be doing an intuitive one, intensive, September the 16th through the 24th. Anyway, I sound like the record in lots of ways, and that the simplicity of doing this work is really comes right down to the willingness to do it, and on our own, it's just very difficult to do. It's just very, very difficult. Most people that I've talked with have been looking for and challenged with every type of workshop and information that's out there. And I remember when I discovered Michael's work, the last set of tools that you'll ever need. And in my mind, I was going, oh, yeah, well, here's another one. Here's more good stuff. And so I listened to the very opening of it. And from there, I was fortunate to follow his instructions, because Michael will always invite people to do 5 worksheets a day for the next 40 days, or do 1 worksheet a day for the next 200 days. And, and breaking that down to look at that in a realistic way. Let's say that a person spends 15 minutes. That's an hour and 15 minutes a day out of, and let's see, an hour and 15 minutes a day, 7 days, 8.5 hours out of 168 hours a week in order to connect with and to have some sanity. That's a small investment, really small investment in looking at it in that perspective. Most people will spend more time debating whether to do it than to do it. And it takes less time and it's easier to do it than it is to think about it. So, callers, people listening into the chat room, put the pen to the paper, ask for support from someone, and start making the shift. Create the results in your life that you want to. Come to the intensive. We're beginning a Laws of Living tonight, as you know, Tim, and 16 days of it, and I assure you, anyone that comes and participates at this level, that their whole life makes such a shift that they will just absolutely let go of a tremendous amount of they'll do a tremendous amount of healing, let go of a lot of things. You know, Michael, you might spend just a moment and talk about the laws of living and the respect of people that of how you and Dan and other people took it into the prison systems and the result that they had from doing this laws of living. That's what I'd like to hear about.
Before you do that, we do have a hand up on the switchboard.
Oh, we got a hand up. Well, we'll take the hand up then.
Before we jump in on the switchboard, just a thought on what David said. I'd offer one slight shift in what you had to say, David. I don't think that it's hard for people to do the work alone. It's no easier, it's no more difficult to do it alone. However, it's hard to stick to it because so much comes up and we get misled in the process. So the work is really pretty simple and pretty easy to do, but the willingness to face what surfaces without support becomes, for most people, extremely difficult.
I agree 100%. Very well put.
Cool. So, Jeanie, we've got a caller.
Yes, we do. Area code 603. You're on the air.
Hi, this is Lynn.
Well, hey there,
Hi,
great young lady.
Lynn.
How are you?
So good. So good to be back. Well, I've listened a couple of days, but then work has intervened. I'm calling to share what happened yesterday related to the work that I did on Tuesday.
Right.
And it's fabulous. Just a quick recap is the executor of the estate I had mentioned, which was what started the whole process of my work, had let my dad's house just deteriorate with mold and water in the basement in the year that she's been in charge, and now she's saying it's hard to sell. Because when she shows it, everybody mentions the water and mold, and no one makes an offer. Duh. So I was really upset with that, and after we talked, I wrote Wednesday, I believe it was. I responded to her email where this was divulged, and I did it in a very neutral way, just asked some questions. And the email I got back was a real slam. I am in charge. I'm making the decisions. I sent the information to the three of you, meaning myself and Sibs, as a courtesy. So I'll make the decisions and basically bug out. And I was tempted to respond to that by saying, respond to the details of that. And instead, I just sent her an email, and I said, Brenda, and this to me is totally a result of the work. I said, Brenda, thank you so much for all that you've done. I think you're doing a fabulous job with the estate. Really appreciate your hanging in there against the odds with a, difficult situation. And then I get an email back that says, thank you for your response. So it was just something I needed to share.
Cool. Well, sounds like a little more peaceful place than where you started with it.
Yeah, and the fact that she totally changed as a result of my shift.
Yeah.
That's what was really striking.
How it works.
Yeah, really striking. So
Very
let me
cool.
just ask. I'm on the website. I've the Earth Angels Radio, the Blog Talk.
Right.
How do I get to the chat room? I've already registered. Jeanie helped me with that. Now, how do I get to the chat room?
Well, Jeanie will have to tell you because I'm not sure.
Okay.
You there, Jeanie?
And maybe that's...
Okay. When you log in with your
Log
name
in.
and password, then click on it'll show the title of the show, and it'll say, that it's running and how many minutes are left. And just click on that, and then if you scroll all the way down, the chat room opens automatically, but it's way down at the bottom of the screen.
Okay. Thanks a bunch.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, thank you for the call, and keep us in touch. And if anyone else has any questions or thoughts about where we're going, the call-in number is 646-200-4169. We'd love to hear from you. Anyone who has any questions about the work, we are here for support. We were talking a moment ago about how these goals become generational. You look at the ancient Aramaic physics language, and it says, "Look to the lives of the fathers, for ours are but a shadow of theirs upon the earth." In essence, what they're saying is that the perceptions, the goals, the habitual filters that are used are passed on from generation to generation. The frequency that carries that whole pattern is called genetics in our culture. And, they used to tell us when they first started doing genetic research that about 95% of DNA was junk. It was junk DNA. It didn't mean anything. Well, we've known for a long time that there's no junk in there, that everything has a purpose, and that literally our whole genetic bloodline, all the patterns of our generations are carried within the structure. You might remember the ancient story about the Jews wandering in the desert for 40 years, and that word desert is a code word for the unconscious or the dissociated mind. And what they said had to happen in order to get out of the desert, the unconscious place, into a conscious place, which was the promised land. And this is a story about us. It's not a story about these old fogies in the desert 2,000 years ago or several thousand years ago. It's about us. What they said had to happen is the old generation had to die off. That didn't mean that everybody in old physical bodies had to physically die. The root of the word generation is genari. It means cause. And so when you recognize there's nothing permanent about your genetics, it is your right to change them any time that you choose to acquire the skill of removing your content. Now, like anything else, you're going to have to take some time to develop that skill. Well, how much time is it going to take, Michael? I've got 5 minutes and $5. Tell me everything you know. Well, let's think about it. Do you remember the first time you sat down at a computer? You didn't even know how to turn it on, right? Somebody had to instruct you to turn it on. And then there was this thing called a mouse. Let's see. There's a right button and a left button and a little wheel, and I roll it around, and there's a start menu, and then, then you got how many hours have you spent learning to operate your computer to become as proficient as you are, let's say, to get on the site? I bet it's been hundreds, maybe thousands. I know that I personally have never taken a computer course, but I run a lot of my life through the computer. I've spent thousands and thousands of hours learning, understanding, seeing how the tools work, practicing using the tools, just to be able to write a letter or send an email or receive an email or get on and make a purchase online or whatever. You are the owner, the possessor of a biocomputer that is 1,000,000 times as intricate and capable as the one that you're sitting at typing at right now to be on the show if you're on the chat room. 1,000,000 times more capable. But what the world does is it focuses us with the outer eye on what's going on out there and all this stuff out there and the Colosseum. Why? Because if you took charge of your own human biocomputer, if you actually became as proficient at using it as you are at using your desktop computer or your laptop or your smartphone, guess what? You would be so empowered. You would live your life in such an awesomely creative way that all the kings of the earth would scorn you because you wouldn't be much use to them. So we live in cultures that tend to do the best it can to keep you away from becoming proficient at the use of your own biocomputer, at staying locked into the hostilities and fears that have been generationally programmed into you, and to keep you stuck there. Take some time. What we suggest is that you tithe. And many people say, well, here comes the pitch for money. No, actually, we have a different pitch than that. Here's the pitch. Take 10% of your day, 2.4 hours a day, and put it into doing your work. As you take 2.4 hours a day and you put it into doing your work, watch how your life transforms. Watch how you learn to operate this body-mind unit that is yours and how awesomely your life expands. So rather than being bound by the servants in your own household, as was spoken of in the ancient teachings, take over the servants. Learn how they work. Learn their treachery and their trickery. Remove the ones that don't serve you. And instead of living a life that is a shadow of those who've gone before us, you will come back into control of your own decision-making process, and you will change everything in your biocomputer that doesn't belong. That's the truth of the game. And what was it that was said? Know the truth will set you free. How many think that the kings of old want a population that's free? Not very often. And, of course, how about the kings of new? If we look at King Georgie, who was in there just a little while ago, and then we have King Obama, do you think those kings really want us to understand how we operate? Or do you think they want to keep us mesmerized with all the dramas and strife and struggle and financial problems and on and on and on that are going on in the world? You started out as a human being with a human life. Hold a newborn child, you know exactly what your human life is. You are the essence of love, an awesomely powerful presence called love. I don't care what's going on in your world. Now, if you live in, as Tim said earlier, in hostility and fear, if that's what's habitually operated in your mind, you might question, how is that even possible? Here's how it's possible. Do your work. Throw out the servants from your own temple that don't support you. And bring your temple into alignment with your being so that you embody and incarnate the active presence of a human life, the active presence of love. And as you do that, what happens is you will rid yourself of the mind of non-being. You'll develop the skill of correcting the insane dynamics by which we're controlled by most of the world, and most of the authorities of the world want to hold us in that position. If you go back to the ancient Aramaic language, the teachings of the man named Yeshua, he's popularly known as Jesus. His name wasn't Jesus. His name was Yeshua. But the essence of those teachings was to free us from the servants, to have a more abundant life. And so when you remove the insane dynamics, you realize that it wasn't about the insane doctrines and dogmas that the world teaches. We watched an interesting film last night, very powerful. You need to have worksheets with you. You need to breathe as you do it. It's called The Stoning of Sonora B, or Sonora M. Very powerful film. And you watch how in this particular town that purports to be very religious, Actually, the film starts out with a quote from I believe it's a 16th century poet named Hafiz. And this is in a land where the Quran rules. And he says, the quote went something to the effect of, stop pretending. Let me think. I think I've got it right here. Just 1 second here. My computer's slow. Yeah. It says, don't act like the hypocrite who thinks he can conceal his wiles while loudly quoting the Quran. You look at those who, in this culture, purport or promote war and conflict and strife and fear and condemnation while they proclaim the Scripture. Right? Excuse me. No different. But anyway, in this film, it's very powerful how the doctrine and dogma developed out of so-called the Word of God. And you see these people gathered, screaming, shouting, raging, stone this woman for a charge that was totally and completely trumped up by a husband who wanted to marry a 14-year-old girl. True story. And this is doctrine, dogmatically put forward as the will of God. So there's a great bumper sticker that Jeanie and I found several months ago in a store, and at least I consider it to be a great one. And it says, have you threatened your child with eternal damnation today? Now, inside a certain dogma, that looks like a logical thing to do. Like, that's a good thing to do from a certain point of view. Just like people screaming in this film to stone this woman for her transgression looked like, from inside that particular mindset that was insane, looked like a good thing to do. And they're quite self-satisfied as they do it. But when you think about this awesome, gentle presence of love that comes into the world, clean and clear, except for the genetic garbage that's in its form, and you look at those who would violate that child's essence with this threat of this torturous, horrific place created by love, and you got to start to think twice about, am I looking from within a dogma and a doctrine that's pretty bizarre and insane? And if I am, it's time to shed it. But then, you see in this film, if you happen to watch this film, you see how each time it looks like some human life might come into the fray, someone might speak up and say something loving, caring, nurturing instead of condemning. And you watch one of the perpetrators of the insanity all of a sudden jumps in and stirs the negative emotion. It stirs people to the hostility filter again. I mean, it's really an awesomely powerful film. And it portrays something that still goes on in many places in the world today. And so it's time for us to replace these insane beliefs with the actual teachings of the man who said, hey, if you know the truth, you're going to be free. That's all. You never heard him do any of the stuff that purports to be doctrine and dogma today. And so rather than believing in the stories and the doctrines that have been made up by men based in their hostility and fear, go read what he said in Aramaic. Now, not in Greek, but in Aramaic, and then do it. Believe the man, don't believe in the man. And wow, watch how quickly your life changes. Watch how awesome it is. It's pretty fabulous. So our call-in number, 646-200-4169. If you have a question or a thought, I'd love to hear from you. Jeanie, do we have anybody in the chat room with any questions or anything happening with the phone?
Joe wants to know where we got the film. Then there's a person with their hand up in the switchboard.
Well, actually, David had gotten it through Netflix. We watched it, and last night I went on Amazon and ordered it. It was like $16 on Amazon. And it's The Stoning of Sorayam, Sorayam. There's a book on it as well, but the film is available on Amazon. And it's, I mean, heavy duty is the word.
Yep, definitely. I had covered my eyes during part of it.
Yeah.
And we do have a caller on the line.
Cool.
Area code 804, you're on the air.
Good afternoon, Michael.
Well, hey there, young man.
I am the president. I'm the president of the International Fan Club of Dr. Michael Rice. I am Edward from Las Vegas. And, sir, I must tell you this morning, thank you, nice to hear your all's voice, we have a problem. The problem is we have too many people that want to get into this club, Dr. Rice. We now have a waiting list of 1 trillion years. And even though that only amounts to a split second, I hate to have to tell people that you can't get into this club. It is so special because Dr. Rice's teachings are so awesome, you will be healed. And it's interesting to hear how people resist healing. And that's what I want to talk about today. What is it about myself that just at the moment when I see a potential that I can learn to feel differently and see life through clearer lens? What is it about mankind, Dr. Rice, that we don't want to be the truth of who we are?
Well, it's really pretty simple, and that is that we have this multi-generational database in our genetics that we've bought into as our identity. When we buy into that identity, to heal and move back to love means you have to give that identity up. And in the ancient teachings, that was called the dark night of the soul.
Well, may I ask you this here? How can you recognize love when you? I feel at times that life is really changing very fast for me, and my whole purpose is to be in love. And then all of a sudden, the outside world gives me an unloving experience, and it keeps testing my willingness.
Well, of course, the outside world can't give you an unloving experience. Only your mind can give you a loving experience, an unloving or a loving experience. So when you have an unloving experience, it's because you have content in your multi-generational database that is unloving. It's got nothing to do with the world. Now, of course, if you hold unloving content, you literally set up an actual energetic field. You know, you were in the Why Is This Happening to Me Again workshop when I talked about the blessing of the work I'd gotten to do with this fellow named Marcel Vogel back about 25 years ago. And what Marcel had was a camera in his laboratory with which to take a picture of the high energy waves that leave the mind when we think a thought. So if I hold that life is hell and somebody's going to get me, I'm continuously, I first of all have an identity based in that hell. And the identity that I hold is that somebody's going to get me. When I start to forgive that, when I start to collapse that, all of a sudden that identity, that which I think I am, starts to scream and say, no, don't get rid of me. I am who you are. If you get rid of me, you get rid of your very life. And, of course, that's just a big con job. And when you collapse that, what's left is being. What's left is the natural human life and the direct experience of love. And so as you make a commitment to do your work, you know, there's this fellow Yeshua 2,000 years ago who said, you know, once you put your hand to the plow, you can't remove it because there's crazy glue on the handle. Once you say, okay, I'm ready to go for it, then life is going to send you a series of circumstances that will show you every unloving experience in your mind. And if you choose to forgive, then you will live without unloving experiences. Whatever somebody else does will be up to them. You won't be involved in that game.
Well, that's amazing,
Make
Dr.
sense?
Rice, because I understand that my mind created an experience. And what happened was, a couple of weeks ago, I saw in my rearview mirror blinking lights of a policeman. And I thought to myself, who, me? Impossible. So I pulled right over, and my first thought was, what would Dr. Rice do in a situation like this? Be like Dr. Rice. So I went to the glove compartment and got my registration, my license, and I thought love. I said, just be loving to the policeman. So he came walking by the window, and he looked at my back seat, which had a bunch of stuff. I could absolutely be very suspicious looking that I had something hidden underneath these sheets that I had there. So I smiled really big, and I said to him, thank you very much for pulling me over. I know I deserve a ticket, and I'm willing to learn from this lesson. But would you kindly tell me what I did wrong? And he smiled back, and he said, you are driving too slow. And you're going 30 miles an hour in a 45-mile zone, and that's dangerous. And I said to him, you know, I get to learn from this lesson because I have been pulled over before for the same thing. And I said, what I need to learn is that I need to change this mechanical thinking. I'm always thinking about, you better not drive too fast. You'll get into trouble. But the most important thing in the dialogue was I noticed that I was not judgmental about that the policeman was pulling me over, and I should really be upset at him. And so then I said to the gentleman, I said, you know, I'm so impressed with your attitude that I want to call your area command person and commend you for your wonderful attitude. And he said, well, I'm not giving you a ticket. And I said, well, I'm not calling for the purpose to tell them that you didn't give me a ticket. I'm calling to tell them that there is a better way to view the police department, that they're here to protect us. And for our own safety reasons, I get to feel at peace. So I got his area command number. And I called, of course. And the lady told me, she said, we never have phone calls like this. We have lots of complaints that come in. So she said, I'm going to document this information, put it in the officer's file. What I learned from this situation was that the terror that I deal with being afraid of people, something has happened since I've been involved in your work. And that is that at the split second where something like blinking lights of a police car are in my rearview mirror, I get to change the reaction. And I get to say and feel on another level that everything is perfect just as it is. Just listen, 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 and know that whatever happens is just my experience and my reaction to the experience. So what I'm learning from you on a very, very different level is to stay with myself and not listen to that inner voice of what from the past tells me that there's something wrong, that everything is right in spite of the appearance. And that's what you are you're the prophet of this generation, Dr. Rice. You have taught me how to be in life and be at peace. And I thank you so much.
Well, I'm delighted to be on the team, Edward, and supporting you. And, as we recognize, there's this fellow 2,000 years ago who said, before you start asking the Creator for what you want, recognize that the Creator already knew and sent it to you. It's already on its way.
And when we see life from the point of view of, life is here to nurture me, life is here to support me and bring me what I need, then every circumstance becomes my opportunity. But it's only an opportunity if we stay connected to the active presence of love. And so that's the idea of the game. And I'm delighted that the work is impacting you the way that it is. We're glad to be on the team and here to support you in it.
Well, thank you very much. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to order 6 of your books. Why is this happening to me again? I want to start giving them away. I want to celebrate my feeling about life and the impact that you have made. And the way of giving back to people is to openly and to share the teaching. And so I'm going to put $100 in the mail today, and at your convenience, wait till you get over your workshops and everything, if you'll send me 6 of those books. And that's my commitment, is to be proactive in seeing that this teaching gets out to the world.
Okay, Edward, I'll give you a shout after the show, and we'll talk about that. We have a package on books. If you buy 10 or more, they drop from $15 to $9, so you probably better off doing that. But I'll give you a shout after.
You're always giving away a part of. You're always giving away a part of yourself, Dr. Rice, and that's why I call you now.
The idea is putting every mind, heart, and being on the planet. That's what we're here to do.
Well, our support group is going fine, and everybody is just learning so much. And I saw you up on the screen Wednesday night, and you look like the President of the United States. You're so imposing looking on the screen with that fabulous-looking Brooks Brothers suit that you have. And
I had a Brooks Brothers suit. No, never have spent that much money on a suit. It's not in my game.
I think that was a suit maybe from the days you were with IBM or something like that. I don't know. But anyway, you look. There was a new man there, and the man said that you were so important looking. And I said, the gentleman. I said, Dr. Price has 10 trillion fans on this planet alone. How, of course, he's very important looking and brilliant to boot. So thanks again for all your input and your sharing. And to your beautiful wife, Jeanie, please be well and know that I'm thinking about you.
Okay. Well, Edward, we're glad to be on the team, and I'll give you a shout after the show, and we'll work out the books.
Fantastic. Blessings to you, people.
All right, sir.
Have a wonderful day.
Have a blessed one.
Thank you.
All righty. Bye-bye. So we thank you all for being with us. Bring a stranger with you tomorrow to the show. Come with your questions. The show always becomes more powerful when someone calls in personally with something to share. And have the best year yet to be in your life.
Thank you for listening to Mind Shifters Radio with the Forgiveness Doctor, Dr. Michael Rice, and his wife, Jeanie, who present the internal Aramaic process of forgiveness. Michael and Jeanie are here every Monday through Friday from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Earth Angels Radio. For more on Michael and Jeanie, please visit www.whyagain.com. That's www